It's a schus for our shul, our kehillah, to be regarded as a host. We feel that we're the guests and Agudas Yisrael and its Torah projects and the Torah Chashva Yidden, Rabbi Gottesman's great efforts, Rabbi Weinberger, sonst alle sein gesund. We were happy to and honored to be the guests / hosts of this event. Rabbi said yesterday we learned by Hibin Soya Orain. The Nesiya of the Orain is a Davar Nifla Ad Ma'od. Chazal tell us, particularly in the Zohar HaKadosh, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo yovid nisa lamagna. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not perform seemingly purposeless nisim. The world is noiheg al pi teva, the teva that HaKadosh Baruch Hu instituted, and a nes, which by definition is a violation, a breaking of that teva. That's not done unless there's a great purpose. We find 3 nisim with regard to the Aron that are, and that's by definition is remarkable, but they are remarkable in their own right, and the toyelis of them needs to be understood. For example, Chazal tell us that Makom Aron eino min amida. The Aron didn't take up space. If you measured from one end of the Heichal to the next, the wall space, and then you measure till the Aron, and then from the other end of the Aron on, it's the exact same thing, as if it wasn't there, and there it is. So the Aron is Einay min Amida. That's one phenomenal nes, and the question is, what do we need the nes for? The Aron, that's a Gemara in Yuma, that the Aron Einay min Amida. You just learned it. Another is a nes that the Gemara brings in Masechta Soita, that Nasa Aron is nice of, that the Aron carried those who presumed to carry the Aron. Also remarkable. And if they had enough people to carry it, they could have carried it. What do we have from that nes? And then there's a third nes. The Yerushalmi says in Erevin, Bamidbar, in the Midbar, mi hoye mechaven lahem es haruchos. Who navigated the directions in order to travel? Amar Rabba Acha, Orain hoye mechaven lahem es haruchos. The Orain used to set the ruach, and in the Korban Ha'eda it says, Shetzad marovoi shel Orain hoye maimid atzmoi lemarovoi shel oilam mechuven. So in other words, when it came time to travel, the Orain itself picked itself up and directed, and Klal Yisrael followed. 3 remarkable nisim. If I may, I'd like to just understand it together with the Olam. I'm not a scientist, but I think the Metzias that we were taught in school as little children were that there are three basic laws of physics. One is that in order for something to be matter, it has to take up space. That's the definition of matter. It has volume, mass, and it takes up space. A second is that if it is in a gravitational field, if it's in an area in which there is a tug of gravity, it has b'mitzius, be'etzem, weight. All matter has weight if it's in a place where there's a tug, a gravitational field. A third law is the law of inertia. The law of inertia says that an object will stay at rest And an object in motion will stay in motion unless acted on by an outside force. So there are three mitziasin that create that which is called physical. Inertia, I'm going backwards, weight, and occupying of space. That means in order to be something that's physical, something that's gashmi, it is subject to those three laws. It could be that Chazal are telling us that the Aron defied each one of those laws, and those are these three nisim. The nest that Aron is einem in amida is that it doesn't occupy space. The nest that it's noise is noise of, that it has its natural buoyancy, is that it defies gravity. The nest that it picks itself up, like Chazal tell us in the Yishalmi and Erevin, and that the Aron itself picks itself up and sets direction, that defies the law of inertia. All three Yisoidis of Gashmias are broken by the Mitzias of the Aron. What's the Tachlis? The Tachlis is to tell you that the Aron is Hecha. The Aron is not subject to Gashmias. Of course, that the Yishalmi and Erevin that tells us that we follow the Aron, Klal Yisrael followed the Aron actually in its travels. Of course, one doesn't have to be marich on the remazim that's inherent in that. Chazal, we just we're in Yutes Sivan. We're only 2 weeks from Kabbalah Satira. In Kabbalah Satira, there's a phenomenon. Kiyudua, Taisus and Shabbos is oimid on what the Gemara says, that Kafa Aleihim Ha Kigigas, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Tachtas Ahar, you're beneath the mountains, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu tipped Har Sinai over and said, Im tekapelus HaTorah mutav, v'im lav, sham tehekvu raschem. If you accept the Torah, fine. If not, here, in front of you is your grave. That's the greatest form of oinus. Frek Taisus the Kasha. Klal Yisrael already said Nasa v'nishma. What's the purpose of being ma'anas Klal Yisrael? So Taisus has his teretz of the Eish Hagadol, and the Medrash Tanchuma has its teretz that was for Torah Shebal Peh, and Nasa v'nishma was for Torah Shebiksav. But the Maral says an extraordinary teretz, extraordinary, difficult to understand. He said, because Kabbalah Satira cannot be be'etzem voluntary. It has to be ba'inus. It has to be coercion. It has to be in his lashon hechreichi. It can't be that it's ich will ja, ich will nicht. It can't be. Which begs the kasha, then what's the nasa v'nishma? So if I just share with the Olam how I understand this, Lefini is daiti. Unfortunately, we sometimes hear that there are people, as they get old and frail, or even younger people who Chalila are very seriously ill, that they suddenly lose their sense of appetite. They don't eat. It's very dangerous, matzav. And intervention is necessary so that Pashat they stay alive. It's Sakanas Nefashis. I never heard a story of an elderly or sickly person that lost their interest in breathing. Never heard of such a thing. What's the pshat? They lose their interest in eating, and eating is brought, the Sugya and Yuma, mar masik mar. If a person loses the sense of taste to such a degree that that which is bitter tastes to him sweet, and vice versa, that's a Sakanas Nefashis. The Rambam uses a mashal for where we have to intervene. He uses it for Ruchdis Dika mashal in Hilchos days. But ma masik mar, here we're talking about a person who has zero taste. For them, food is like a piece of paper. But we never heard about a person losing his sense of wanting to breathe. What's the pshat? The answer is simple. Again, we go back to basics. Eating is a primary need. Breathing is a primary need, but they're different. One is voluntary response, and breathing, respiration, is called an involuntary response. You don't have a choice. It's like your heart beating. You don't decide for your heart to beat. You don't decide to inhale. Chalila v'chas, when a person is aware of his inhaling and his inability to inhale. But it's not up to you. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chachmasai ha'elyoina realizes for us that if you stop eating, you can survive. You could survive more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You could survive days. And in some situations, even more than that. It's primary, it's necessary, it's sakonas nefashos, but it's not immediate. If someone stops breathing, within minutes, short minutes, there's irreversible brain damage. He can't survive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't leave breathing up to us that we should make a decision. I'm not in the mood, I don't have an appetite, because it's fatal. Eating is long-term fatal, but I leave that up to you. That's the difference between voluntary and involuntary. Zok de Maral, Kabbalah HaTorah has to be involuntary because we have to recognize Ki Heim Chayenu, that's the etzem breathing of a Yid. So Nasa v'Nishma was Klal Yisrael like Yisrael. We know it's primary, we want to do it. But besod, b'toiras achila, I must have it, but I'll decide when I want to eat and when I don't want to eat. But the Eibishter sagt, das ist nicht genug. It has to be for you neshima. You can't decide. It has to be hechrechi. Is memela kafa aleim hakigis. Rabbi say, from these two nekudas, one, that the Aron and what it represents defies every law of physics, to show that it has no shaykhis to gashmias, it's above, it's ruchnias. Ein kol chodosh tachas hashemesh, Zohar Kodesh, it says, Avo lemala min hashemesh yesh. Zogt men ibel von Rav Hutner, Sechet Tzadik Levracha, that punkta zoivi tachas hashemesh in nitshayach chidush is lemala min hashemesh nitshayach on chidush. Avo lemala min hashemesh yesh means that above the shemesh there must be chidush, just like Tachas HaShemesh, they can't be Chiddush. And then he adds in the Kuda, therefore, Ein Beis Medrash B'li Chiddush. While a Beis Medrash is Lamala Min HaShemesh. A Beis Medrash is higher than Teva. The Beis Medrash defies the laws of physics. The Olam has come together on days of Yom Pagra that our society uses for vocational purposes. And yet a Yachikala says, what? We have some free time? Keim chayenu. That's the etzem chiyus. Please, let's get together. Lama learning, let's take a new sugya. Look at the sugya that they chose. Sugya in Inyanim from Shabbos. Shabbos is a davar nifla. I thought of something once, and I was delighted that I found that Hagoy and Hagodl, Rabbi Yosef Engels, Echet Tzadik v'Kadosh Levracha, brings it in his drashas, the Shabbos Shuvah drasha, and he brings it b'shem haramah in the Teiras Ha'olam. So I feel comfortable now saying a vart that I thought of many years ago. Chazal tell us that Binyan HaMishkan is not Doiches HaShabbos. And the essence, essentially why, Ayin Ramban, the Ramban Chumash says that this is one of the Yisoidus of the Torah, is Binyan Beis HaMikdash, or Binyan HaMishkan in that case, can't be Doiches HaShabbos, because the Lamed Tes Malachas of Shabbos are learned out of the Mishkan. And what's the Yisoid of that? So I was thinking, and then I found that Baruch Hashem, Shteit Ramah, in his Sefer Teiras Ha'olam. Kadmonim, the Gemara tells us, Mount Sukkah and other places, that the Mishkan is considered to be Olam Katan. One of the proofs that the Mishkan, or I shouldn't say proofs, what corroborates that the Mishkan is Olam Katan is from Allah mention of all people, B'Tzalel. B'Tzalel, what the Gemara says in Brachas, that B'Tzalel is Oimeid B'Tzeil Keil. Shechoya Yoideya L'Tzareif Oisyois Shabehem Nivru Shamayim V'Aretz. That means B'Tzalel knew the sod of Brias Ha'olam. He knew how to use the aleph beis for Brias Ha'olam. To me, that says, now I understand Favos von Allah Chachamim, why Dafke Shlomo HaMelech had to be able to understand Sichas Tekolim and every single kind of communication of every possible creature, because he had to understand the Seidas HaBriya. He's building a Beis HaMikdash. So Punktas Avi B'Tzalel, Shlomo HaMelech had the code, the key to Brias Ha'olam. Which means that the oilam is a oilam cotton. If the oilam is that's replete, Chazal replete with that the Mishkan is a oilam cotton. The Ramchal, if the Mishkan is an oilam cotton, then that which is needed to create a oilam cotton, to build and construct the oilam cotton, has to be in micro what the creation of the world was in macro. So Pasha, this is the Groisa Olam, and in miniature, this is the Klein Olam. So you use the exact same technology, so to say, to create this Olam cotton that you did for the Olam Gadol. So Mamela, the Lamed Tes Malachis of the Mishkan, which we know what they are, revealed to us what were the Lamed Tes Malachas that the Eibishter used to create the world. If so, on Shabbos, when he stopped using those Lamed Tes Malachas, Shabbos Vayinofash, that we have to stop doing those very same Malachas on Shabbos, because that's Eidus to the Bria. Is Mamela, it's not simply a hekish in Pashas Vayakel that we learn out by juxtaposition that Mishkan and Shabbos are related. But Be'etzem Mishkan and Shabbos related. Because Mishkan is Olam Cotton. Shabbos, the Olam Gadol had to use, Kaviyachal used, Lefi, Kaviyachal used those same methods. There's a Ksiva, there's a Hakoitza in Brias Olam. And the Eibishter was Shabbos Veidafash from them. So Mamela, we too. So the side of Mishkan and Shabbos is very closely related. Mishkan does not violate Shabbos. It's not Teiches HaShabbos. But interestingly enough, Pikuach Nefesh is. And in Kadmonim, from Rabbeinu Sadia and on, Zoya HaKadosh refers to the Adam as an Olam Cotton. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has planted in our world two Olam Cottons. A Olam Cotton that's the Mishkan, and the Olam Cotton that's the Adam. And for the Adam, we do our Doiches HaShabbos. Pikuach Nefesh Doiches HaShabbos. For that Olam Cotton, we're not, and for the Olam Cotton that's called Adam, we are Doiches HaShabbos. And sometimes that Dechia, or that Hutra, which I think the Olam will hear about, that sometimes it can extend itself, that since there's a heta for Pekuach Nefesh or other extenuating circumstances that one can do this malacha, then comes the question, can we go beyond the Pekuach Nefesh? And that's the sugya of Ribu B'Shiurim. So, on a day in which we find a little bit more time, and under the aegis of Agudas Yisrael and the beautiful Torah project, and we're zeicha to host here in Gedolei Torah say shiurim in different forms, in different presences. the Torah that's hechreichi, the Torah that defies nature, a beis medrash that's lamala min hashemesh, is zoicha to take in the sugyas of olam katan, that's not nitcha mishkan, and olam katan adam that is nitcha, and the name of that sugya is Ribuy B'Shiurim. I thank Good Yisrael once again, Yedidi, Rab Shlomo, everyone else who was involved, Rav Gedalia Zangizim, everyone for bringing this wonderful Kiddush Hashem to our Kehil and to our Shul. A good Tag and Hatzlacha.